Let's jump right in. There is this incredibly persistent myth out there that artistic talent is just something you're born with. You either have it or you don't, right? Well, if you've ever believed you simply can't draw, the groundbreaking concepts from Betty Edwards' classic book, The New Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, might completely flip how you think about your own mind. In this explainer, we're going to dive into exactly how the brain hemispheres affect art, and we'll discover how to unlock the pretty incredible artist that's actually already hiding inside your own head. I mean, think about it for a second. Why is it so incredibly hard to just draw what's sitting right in front of your eyes? It's a deeply relatable frustration. You sit down, you look at a totally normal 3D object like a coffee mug or even your own hand, and you try to sketch it out. But somehow the result looks like a child's scribble. You have perfectly good vision, you have the fine motor control to write letters flawlessly, so why does the drawing fall apart so spectacularly? Well, that exact disconnect is the core conflict we're exploring today.
All right, part 1. Why drawing is so hard. To figure this out, we have to look back at author Betty Edwards' time as a high school art teacher, where she ran into this massive puzzle. She noticed that her really bright, capable students were struggling intensely to draw a simple still life. They do bizarre things, like draw an orange and a vase but put them in the exact same physical space on the paper, just totally ignoring the laws of physical reality. And if she pointed out these spatial errors, the students would swear they were looking directly at the objects. They'd say, "I'm looking right at it, I just don't know how to draw that." The issue wasn't their hands, it was that they simply lacked the ability to process and describe the visual reality right in front of them. It was a problem with how their brains were processing what their eyes were seeing.
Which brings us to part 2. Meet your two brains.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how psychobiologist Roger Sperry's Nobel Prize-winning split-brain research in the late 1960s illuminated the exact biological cause of this drawing problem. He showed us precisely how the brain hemispheres affect art. See, he discovered that our brain's two hemispheres process sensory information in completely fundamentally different ways. So your brain doesn't just have one way of thinking, it actually has two distinct modes that end up competing with each other depending on what you're trying to do. Edwards breaks this down into what she calls L mode for the left hemisphere and R mode for the right hemisphere. And when you compare them, it's wild. L mode acts like this chatty, super impatient boss. It's verbal, it's analytic, and it's obsessed with logic, symbols, and keeping track of time. R mode, on the flip side, is your silent, spatial observer. It takes in the whole picture simultaneously. It absolutely does not care about time, and it doesn't use words at all. It strictly uses visual perception.
Moving on to part 3. The left brain's interference.
So how exactly does this split system ruin your sketches? Well, for most of us, that speedy L mode is the dominant hemisphere. It's super efficient and it just bullies its way into visual tasks. This literally creates a physical sensation of mental conflict. Instead of letting the right brain actually observe the spatial reality of, say, an eye, the left brain jumps in and forces us to use memorized childhood symbols. You know, like drawing that almond shape with a dot in the middle. Take the famous vase and faces illusion. If you try to draw this, you're probably going to feel a sense of mental paralysis. Why? Because this optical illusion intentionally causes a clash between your hemispheres. Your left brain is desperately trying to name the parts. Okay, that's a forehead, that's a nose. While your right brain is just trying to draw the spatial curves. It's a literal tug of war in your head.
And here is the ultimate irony of the whole thing. The L mode absolutely thinks it can draw, but it only uses stored generic symbols from when you were a kid. It totally ruins the drawing by forcing you to use inappropriate symbols, like a single line for a mouth or a perfect circle for an apple. And then, once the drawing looks incredibly naive, guess who is the first to supply derogatory judgments? The left brain. It literally criticizes you for the terrible artwork that it forced you to create in the first place. You can't win.
Let's look at part 4, shifting to right mode.
Okay, to actually solve this problem, we have to perform a conscious cognitive hack. We literally need to intentionally turn off that overbearing left hemisphere and activate the subdominant right hemisphere so it can finally do the visual work it was built for. As the great Fats Waller famously said, "If you gotta ask what Jaws is, you ain't ever gonna know." Edwards uses this quote along with the idea of Alice stepping through the looking glass to explain a really vital truth. You can't just talk about shifting from your left to your right brain. You have to physically experience this elusive cognitive state. It is a subjective shift in consciousness that you simply have to feel to understand.
And finally, part 5, visual tricks and brain hacks. It turns out we can actually present the brain with tasks that the left hemisphere absolutely hates. And when we do that, it forces the left brain to just drop out of the process entirely, leaving the right brain totally free to take the wheel. For example, look at this upside-down drawing of Igor Stravinsky by Picasso. Edwards did this famous experiment in her classroom where she asked her most frustrated students to copy this exact sketch, but completely upside down. The results? Mind-blowing. Students who swore up and down they couldn't draw suddenly produced these astonishingly accurate, beautifully rendered copies of the sketch.
The mechanics behind this hack are just brilliantly simple. Basically, L mode looks at the task and says, yep, I don't do upside down. Because the left brain relies on naming things, nose, eye, collar, it gets instantly frustrated by an inverted image. It just can't quickly decipher and name the upside down parts. So, throwing its hands up in the air, the left brain gives up and drops out. This leaves your spatial, nonverbal right brain entirely free to just look at the lines, the angles, and the relationships and trace the actual spatial reality. Another amazing hack is called pure contour drawing. If you want to capture a beautifully detailed sketch of a hand, you essentially just stare endlessly at minute, seemingly boring details like the tiny wrinkles on your palm, and you draw them very, very slowly without ever looking down at your paper. The left brain absolutely hates this. It's like, okay, I already named it, it's a wrinkle, let's move on. The sheer boredom of tracking slow, complex, unnamed spatial details causes the left brain to tap out from sheer frustration, and that allows your right brain to finally step in and capture the true, complex beauty of the form.
So how do you know when you've actually made this cognitive shift? Well, the R mode state feels incredibly blissful and highly focused. You'll actually lose your sense of time. Hours can literally feel like minutes. You will experience complete verbal silence in your mind. No more chatty boss. You'll feel this relaxed but really deep alertness, feeling entirely at one with the work. And honestly, not only does this state dramatically improve your art, but it provides a massive, welcome relief from the constant, exhausting chatter of your left brain.
Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to ponder. If simply changing how your brain processes visual information can instantly unlock an inherent ability to draw beautifully, what other hidden abilities are waiting over there in the right side of your brain? Corporate executives and educators are already using these exact same drawing exercises to train people to see the whole picture in business and in life. By learning to quiet the left brain and activate the right, you might just be unlocking entirely new ways to solve complex problems every single day. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope you leave here today ready to tap into the right side of your own brain.